My mother-in-law said the words, "I'm not engaged to a poor man with no parents and only a junior high school diploma," which were so cruel that they made a big deal out of my brother's academic background and my complicated family situation. I couldn't forgive my brother, who has dedicated his life to me rather than himself, being insulted like this. As the government, I'll give him a meal. Even Junia, his fiancée, was transferred to the spirit world. In despair, my brother quietly began to operate his smartphone. I told my brother, who was filled with extraordinary anger, "Let's go home, big brother." Junia-san and my mother-in-law did not stop their condescending attitude until the end. Just as I was once again in despair at their arrogance, my mother's smartphone rang loudly, and my mother-in-law's face changed color as she pressed the answer button. "What's
going on? Just..."
As my mother-in-law was about to leave the front door, shooing us away, I heard a scream-like voice from my mother-in-law. I turned around and saw Junia's father, out of breath, kneeling and begging. "Please wait. Please don't go." Junia was confused by the sight of his father-in-law rubbing his body against the floor.
"What on earth happened to my dad?" My
stepmother also turned pale and started shaking. "My name is Hayama Rin. I'm 26 years old. I work for a home appliance company. I lost both my parents in an accident before I even knew what I was doing, and I've always lived my life looking up at my older brother Kotaro, who is a year older than me. My brother was about to enter high school, and he had the option of putting me in a facility, but he didn't. He gave up on continuing his education and worked from morning to night. He delivered newspapers at a construction site and even worked at a night job. I was too young to understand all of my brother's hard work, but the sight of him getting exhausted left a deep impression on me, even though I was young. I went to school like my friends around me and was able to go to college. Thanks to my brother's hard work, he paid for all of my tuition fees and even the cost of living alone. My brother always lived a simple life and put his own needs second. I don't think he ever bought new clothes. My life today is built on the sacrifices of my brother. When I got a job at a home appliance company, I was relieved. Now I can give back to my brother, even if only a little. Even now that I'm a working adult, my gratitude to my brother never fades from my heart. My brother is an irreplaceable light to me, and my way of life. The first time I spoke to Junia was at a social gathering in the car. He was known as the ace of the development department, and people were always gathered around him. He called out to me kindly, as I was living alone. "Is there something I can help you with?" His gentle smile and polite way of speaking at that time slowly seeped into my heart. After that, he greeted me cheerfully every time we passed each other in the hallway, and we naturally became close after working together several times. I was drawn to him more and more by his intellectual conversation and sense of humor that he sometimes showed. The first time he invited me to dinner was on the way home one day after a long day of overtime work. "If you don't mind, how about having dinner together?" I nodded nervously, but he smiled with a relieved look on his face. That night, we talked about various topics, including work and hobbies. The conversation with him was so pleasant that I forgot the time. After that, we became lovers after several meals. Although our relationship was short, I felt that he was always kind and caring towards me. That's why he knelt down at a restaurant with a night view, and I want to be with Kieran-san forever. Yes. When he proposed to me, I answered without any hesitation. His gentle words seemed to me to be a promise of eternal love. However, as if those words of proposal were a magic spell, Junia's attitude changed completely from that moment. The calm and gentle expression he had shown me until then disappeared, and instead, a dominant face appeared in the spiritual kingdom. When I was having a business meeting with my boss or a male colleague, my smartphone would immediately vibrate and I would receive a short message telling me not to talk to other men. At first, I thought he was jealous and I smiled a little, but his words escalated day by day. I was in a situation where I felt like I was being watched, and I gradually began to feel short of breath. Even if I ask him out on a weekend date, we're getting married.
So there's no need for it anymore.
He started to look blatantly displeased. The time we spent together, which I used to look forward to, disappeared in an instant. On the contrary, he would read and ignore my line messages without a second thought. But if I was even a minute late in replying to his line, he would ask me who I was meeting and if I was cheating on him. He started to question me in such harsh words. His suspicions of a hidden power were mentally exhausting me. His restrictions extended to my choices and daily life. Don't dress so flashy. Are you inviting a man? He even started to complain about the clothes I chose, and even when I made a dinner date with a friend I'd known for many years, he started to say that it was pointless to hang out with those kinds of people. You're going to be my wife soon, so just do as I say.
He said this and slowly but surely took away my freedom. Incompetent people just need to stay quiet and obey. If I did anything that didn't sit well with him, he would talk to himself in a cold voice, as if he didn't think I could hear him. His change in appearance gradually made me feel anxious and scared. Would I really be happy if I married this person? Where on earth had that gentle man gone? Such doubts grew and weighed heavily on my mind day by day. And then the day of the Rivers Festival for both families arrived. I visited the Tanoyama family with deep doubts, along with my older brother Kotaro, who was more of a socialite. The low-lying house with its large black painted gate in a prime location in the city center was heavy and intimidating, and I was reminded once again of the invisible wall that lay between me and the Yama family's background. Beyond the open entrance were Junia's parents, his father-in-law Hiroaki, his mother-in-law Tomiko, and even Hakase and Oshi. When we were ushered into the hidden Ryuki room, Junia's father Hiroaki hurriedly stood up as soon as he saw us and tried to greet us with a stiff smile. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. Well,
Before he could finish his words, my mother-in-law, who was sitting next to me, spoke in a low voice. But she stopped my father-in-law in a sharp voice.
don't talk without permission. My father-in-law
Was shocked, like a scolded child, and shrugged his shoulders, and said nothing more. From his appearance, I could see that my father-in-law, who is a vain man, was completely unable to look up to my mother-in-law, who was the de facto ruler of this house. It was when Mr. Hiko brought us tea in a bowl. I'll drink it. He pointed at the bowl with a cold eye and said it as if it was a matter of course. Mr. Hiko didn't say anything back, but prepared a new bowl and handed it to us. My mother-in-law looked at the whole exchange with a cold eye, turned to us, and said unbelievable words. These people aren't just guests anyway. I was completely speechless at her blatant condescending attitude and her words that treated us as if we were insignificant. Perhaps trying to break the awkward silence, my brother tried to greet my mother-in-law again. Today is my sister Ree's engagement. But once again, my brother's words were cut off by a word from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law said, I'm a poor man who was raised without parents and only had a junior high school education, and I'm not engaged. The words that came out of my mother-in-law's mouth were so horrible that they made a big deal out of my brother's highest level of education and my complicated family background. I couldn't forgive my brother, who has dedicated his life to me rather than himself, being insulted like this. This person probably has no idea how much hardship my brother has had to endure for me. Unbelievably, even my fiancé, Junya, added to my mother-in-law's words with a nasty smile. Well, if you work as a fire official instead of a bride, I'll give you some food. The words that came out of his mouth showed no respect for me as a person. It was so humiliating. I wonder if this unbelievable scene unfolding before my eyes is really real. The person I loved and vowed to marry is someone who can calmly say such deeply hurtful words in such a cold country. My heart was deeply torn with disappointment and sadness. Meanwhile, my brother, who was sitting next to me, had not said a word, his characteristic calm smile plastered on him since earlier. Usually, my brother is more emotional than anyone else and speaks his mind immediately, but now he is as quiet as a brain. Brother, you are really angry. Seeing this, I felt a feeling close to certainty. When my brother is really angry, he is always like this. Even though he appears calm on the surface, deep inside his calmness there is a fierce anger that cannot be expressed in words. I know this because we have known each other for many years. Then, with a slow movement, my brother took out his smartphone from the inner pocket of his jacket and began to operate something. After a few seconds, he nodded slightly as if he had confirmed something, and put the smartphone back in his pocket with satisfaction. At that moment, an extraordinary presence spread deep in my chest. A sense of certainty that something was about to begin. What should we do? My brother's voice was completely different from the calmness from before, and resonated deeply in my ears. It was a question full of kindness. But at the same time, it was the last word that was necessary to break away from humiliation. The words that trample on people in the spiritual land of Junya-san and my mother-in-law repeated over and over in my head like an afterimage of a nightmare, and a pain that felt like my heart was being squeezed and torn to shreds ran through my whole body. Still, supported by the quiet strength of my brother who was standing next to me, even though he didn't say it, I slowly raised my head. Let's go home. My voice was probably hoarse, so much so that I couldn't even hear it myself. But those short words contained a firm determination that I would never stay in this house again. Hearing my words, my brother slowly turned to face my mother-in-law and Junya-san, but his posture was more determined than before. The gentle smile from before disappeared from his face without a trace, and instead, a cold light like ice appeared. The determination dwelling in the depths of his eyes was, as you say, and above all, in accordance with the firm will of my precious sister, I will officially abandon this engagement today, even though I have lost to Hirei-san. My brother's low but clear voice pierced the two of us quietly but surely like a sharpened cold weapon. But my mother-in-law and Junya didn't seem to understand the weight of my brother's words or the resolve he put into them. They looked at each other, and both of them looked as if they were truly fed up with it, and said loudly and thoughtfully at the same time, I was really hoping that you could be of some use to our dog, so it's a shame. Junya spat out those lowly words with a farewell smile that seemed to belittle the person to the end. Really? I don't want to be stuck with such a poor person forever. My mother-in-law agreed, and calmly uttered unbelievable words that treated us like unpleasant outsiders. Their arrogant attitude and their complete lack of understanding of other people's hearts once again pushed me to the edge of deep despair. At that very moment, the phone in the Oyuki room started ringing loudly and furiously. Nozomi's face was obviously disgusted, and she picked up the phone looking very happy and bothered. Yes, it's Tanoyama. As she listened to the voice on the other end of the phone, my mother-in-law's expression changed visibly. At first, her face looked sulky and unwilling, but it gradually turned to one of disbelief and astonishment, and then to a clear expression of impatience.
What? That's so stupid. What on earth is going on? Her voice gradually grew louder, and her words became mixed with emotional words that were hard to hear. A few minutes later, after the phone conversation ended, my mother-in-law glared at our books with cold, icy eyes as if she could not accept the reality in front of her at all, and spat out unbelievable words. As you can see, I'm very busy right now. I don't have the time to waste any more on insignificant people like you. Get out of my sight already.
To the end, she looked down on us as if we were virtual people, And she never changed her attitude of wanting to get rid of us as soon as possible. To her, we must really be insignificant beings that are so inconvenient that they can't even breathe. We no longer had the energy to say anything back, so we just quietly got up and started walking towards the entrance. I didn't want to stay in this house with a cold atmosphere where the oxygen was thin for even a second longer. I put my hand on the front door and finally tried to get some fresh air. At that very moment, my mother-in-law's voice, which sounded even louder than the phone conversation earlier and sounded like an animal's scream, thundered through the entire room. What was going on? What on earth had just happened? My brother and I looked at each other involuntarily and turned around. Then, out of breath and with sweat on his forehead, my father-in-law chased after us in a hurry, and suddenly bowed deeply at the cold stone step of the entrance, rubbing his body against the ground and prostrating himself.
Please wait. Please don't go. My father-in-law's face was red and bright, and sweat was pouring down from his forehead like a waterfall. His desperate movements were just like those of a drowning person clinging to anything. The expression of a person who has been pushed to the limit. My father-in-law's actions were so bad that they completely exceeded the processing capacity of my brain. The emotion of shock ran through my whole body, and it was as if a heavy stone was stuck in my throat, so much so that even if I tried to speak, I couldn't make a sound. All I could do was stare blankly at this unbelievable scene unfolding before my eyes. My fiancé, Junya, was staring at this abnormal and incomprehensible scene with a look of serious confusion clearly visible on his face, as if he was completely unable to grasp the situation. He didn't seem to understand at all what the image of his father rubbing against the floor meant. In disbelief, he took a step forward toward his father, grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to shake him. Dad, what on earth is going on? Why are you doing this? Lift your head quickly. Stop this ugly behavior. Junya's voice was tinged with confusion and confusion. His usual arrogant attitude was gone, and he seemed completely distraught by the abnormality itself that was happening in front of him. His familiar carefree dreaminess was gone, and instead, only confusion and bewilderment were in his eyes. Junya and her mother-in-law didn't even notice the strangeness on their faces. After the phone conversation, my mother-in-law had been standing there as if she had no idea what the pain was, but when she saw my father-in-law kneeling, she finally seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. Her face was getting paler and paler, her lips were trembling slightly, and it seemed as if her reason was slowly collapsing. However, this unbelievable scene that they were now facing was only a sign of a huge truth that far exceeded their arrogant thoughts and narrow worldview that had been held for many years. A shocking reality that they had never even imagined was approaching. For many years, they had borrowed the name of Kotaro Inayama and behaved in the company as if it were their own. He was the young but spiritual leader of the parent company of the fake electronics company, which had absolute power. Their lives and the future of the company were already at a stage where they were dependent on the movement of his fingertips. The price they paid for the martial arts they showed us today will be unimaginable. At that time, my brother quietly operated his smartphone and sent a short but important message to the company. It was an irreversible move that would determine not only this distorted family relationship, but also the future of their company. Yama was once a deadly business that everyone in the region knew about, and its reliable home appliances spread to many homes, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that it truly woke up an era. It also contributed greatly to the development of the local economy, and was trusted by local residents, and the Yama brand reigned for many years as a symbol of quality and trust. However, the flow of the times was cruel. The wave of globalization swept in, and overseas advancing forces first began to approach the market with overwhelming price competitiveness as their weapon. Masasakusho also tried to resist the wave, but their outdated production process and conservative management strategy were a hindrance, and although they had received a certain amount of praise for their quality, they were unable to compete on the price side, and gradually their market share was taken away. The prolonged economic situation also made the situation even worse, and there was no sign of their former momentum, and their performance was on the decline year by year. Even so, my mother-in-law, the third-generation president, clung to her former glory and made no attempt to change the outdated management methods. Suggestions such as introducing new technology and aggressively expanding overseas did not fall on her ears at all. My brother Yumataro could not bear to see this situation. Atsuki Telecom, a major communications company that he had discovered, was riding the wave of rapid technological confidence and establishing a cool position in the telecommunications industry. My brother, with his cold analytical skills, saw potential in Masasakusho's traditional technical capabilities and the brand power it had cultivated over the years, but he quickly saw that the root of the problem was its outdated management structure. Considering the impact on the local economy, the big decision was finally made to have Atsuki Telecom, where my brother is the president, acquire management rights for Yamasakusho and join the company. This was precisely to overcome this situation and rekindle the spirit of Shigesho. My brother aimed to rebuild Yamasakusho not only with financial assistance, but also with his modern management know-how and bold structural reforms. However, the road to this goal turned out to be much more difficult than initially expected. My brother calmly told my father-in-law, who was still kneeling at the entrance. Mr. Hiroaki Tanoyama, I just contacted the head office and reported the business situation and the complete lack of acceptance of my sister today. As a result, we have decided that the improvements we have pointed out have not been seen, and we have decided to fundamentally review the management structure as of tomorrow. I could sense an unwavering determination in my brother's words. In fact, my brother had been very suspicious of my mother-in-law's management policy for some time. The company's performance had been worsening year by year, and the employees' attitudes were also declining, but my mother-in-law did not acknowledge her own apologies, stuck to the old way of doing things, and rejected new ideas. My brother thought that the true situation could not be grasped by a formal report alone. And for my brother, this wedding greeting was not just a formal family event, but a personal test to determine the character of the Tanoyama family, especially the temperament of the people involved in the process. My brother had told the company in advance that he would send a message to the company saying whether to kill the management structure or maintain it as before, depending on today's attitude. And seeing my mother-in-law's intense focus on me, she decided that my brother was not fit to be a manager and sent him a message of death. My mother-in-law grabbed my father-in-law and questioned him furiously. What on earth is going on? Why didn't you ever tell me that Kotaro was the president of the parent company of this company, which holds absolute power over the Cicadan group? My mother-in-law's voice changed from the thunderous earth she had used earlier.
It was a scream-like voice, a mixture of confusion at being confronted with an unbelievable truth and intense anger at having been deceived. My father-in-law shook his shoulders in surprise at the sight. In fact, from the first time he met Kotaro, my father-in-law had sensed something extraordinary in his sharp, piercing stubbornness, his calm demeanor, and above all, his sense of being a man who could not be put on. Behind his words and his bold gestures, he was clearly different from an ordinary young person. He could not help but feel the presence of a person of a special status. He had tried to tell his mother-in-law several times about the vague anxiety that had been building up in his heart and his wariness of Kotaro. Daitaro's way of speaking and the confident expression he sometimes showed seemed to him to be something more than just a young man.
You should be quiet. Every time he said that, his mother-in-law would yell at him, as if to chase away a pesky bug. Although his brother only graduated from junior high school, his hidden talent and strong will to forge ahead without causing any trouble had attracted the attention of those around him from an early age. In particular, President Sendai, who was still visible at the time, felt something special in Takataro's unadorned frankness and his single-minded passion for his work. From the age of 6, when he was doing on-site work, to complex clerical work, Takataro was sincere in his approach to everything and absorbed everything with astonishing speed. For President Sendai, Takataro's single-mindedness may have reminded him of the love he lost to illness at a young age. Takataro's openness once again ignited the heart of President Sendai, which had been in a daze. President Sendai was reluctant to let Kotaro's talent go to waste, so he actively promoted him as his right-hand man and made him deeply involved in important projects and management decisions. Kotaro lived up to those expectations, achieving one remarkable result after another and steadily gaining trust from both inside and outside the company. His innovative ideas and the ability to put them into practice were enough to impress even the older executives. And when President Sendai decided to retire from his long and heavy duties, he appointed Kotaro as his successor, not a fateful encounter or a subordinate executive who had contributed to the company for many years, but none other than Kotaro. At first, this unfavorable nomination caused a slight stir in the car, but no one could disagree with the overwhelming achievements that Kotaro had shown up to that point and President Sendai's strong new recruits. The executives had no choice but to acknowledge the hidden potential in the young Kotaro and his leadership that would lead the company to even greater heights. Thus, with the surprise and expectations of those around him, my brother rose to become the young president of the parent company with absolute power over the fake home appliance company. The proud mother-in-law still didn't want to apologize. In the tense atmosphere, a silence flowed as if time had stopped. The mother-in-law's shocking words, the father-in-law's seat, and the brother's cold declaration. Everyone was speechless and just stood there. Meanwhile, an elderly woman from the government who had been standing quietly in the corner, as if unable to bear the depressing atmosphere, slowly stepped forward. Her face was deeply etched with the color of years of hard work and fatigue. With trembling hands, she took out a carefully folded white envelope from her inner pocket and silently thrust it in front of Tomiko. After that short silence, the words squeezed out of her mouth resounded as if they cut through the silence of the room. I will quit as of today. Her voice was low but clear, and it was filled with years of patience and firm determination. The government said that for the past 6 months, her small salary had been slowly but surely decreasing without any clear reason. Still, she quietly endured and drank for the house she had used for so many years. However, even though she mustered up the courage to tell Tomiko many times that she could no longer make ends meet, her mother-in-law always responded with a cold one word. The company is in a difficult financial situation, so just bear with it. Her many years of dedicated work, which she said and never listened to, were completely worthless to her wealthy mother-in-law. As the government left, her mother-in-law coldly told her, "There are plenty of people who can take your place." Then Junya blurted out something unbelievable. "But the government says that poor people will obey you in silence if you give them food." The mother-in-law hurriedly cut off Yo's voice. "You should stay quiet."
She was probably afraid that her son's true feelings would reach Kotaro's ears anymore. But it was already too late. The cold words that came out of Junya's mouth exposed the twisted truth hidden in the Tanoyama family to Shiromi. And that truth was the true reason Junya proposed marriage to Shiyama. A convenient alternative to the nagging government. And probably a free human resource. That was who I was to him. Gia proposed to me because he wanted a convenient person to replace the government, who was too nagging. And the management of the fake home appliance company was removed. As a result, all of the relatives, including my mother-in-law, were completely reported by the company. Meanwhile, Sumio was allowed to stay at the company as an ordinary employee. However, he was found to have been expecting to become the next president, and he had been acting violently and repeatedly harassing his colleagues, and he was eventually sued by his colleagues and taken to court. The Tanoyama family, who lost both Samika and Tanoyama, were forced to abandon the face-to-face meetings and social relationships they had maintained and move to a cheap apartment. Then, for the first time, my mother-in-law bowed deeply to me and Kotaro and apologized from the bottom of her heart. Kotaro offered to hire a cleaner for the Tanoyama family's baseball field out of pity. And my brother finally tied the knot with the girlfriend he had been with for many years. On the day of the wedding, when I saw my brother's bright smile and the beautiful bride standing next to him, something warm welled up in my heart. And in that joyous place, my own future also began to take on a brighter light. In the lively atmosphere of the Taisetsuen garden, I met a man. He had a soft, gentle smile that left an impression on me, and as I talked to him, I felt a strange sense of peace in my heart. After meeting a few times, we naturally began a serious relationship with the intention of getting married. Enveloped in seeing my brother looking happy and spending peaceful times with him, I felt myself slowly being freed from the pain of the past. It was as if the sun had finally broken through after a long rain.